All right. Everybody should be able to see the St. Helens logo. Everybody good?
Got it.
Okay. So just go ahead and speak up since it's only a few of us if you have a question, and I will try and keep an eye on the meeting participants. You do have a raise your hand feature. If I don't hear you, speak up. So go ahead and just click that, and I will try and keep an eye on that. So this is going to be an agenda for this evening. We can go quickly through introductions of those that are here, since we do have one new budget committee member with Claire. We'll go through the purpose and role of the budget committee members, a brief process overview of the budget committee, and an overview of the fund structures that the city of St. Helens. And then probably a combination of John and I will just talk about some of the economic trends and outlooks as we start building our, finishing our budget that we're going to propose to you in a couple weeks, and talk about some of the economic trends and forecasts and outlooks that we are looking at right now and focusing on next fiscal year. And then we'll have some open time at the end to answer any questions that you may have that have come up, or questions that you've always wanted to ask the finance director of the city of St. Helens, or any of the staff members that are here in attendance tonight. So the purpose and role of the budget committee is really a standing committee that is appointed by the city council of community members to basically answer one question, and that is, does the proposed budget meet and satisfy the goals of the city council? During the course of the year, city council will set policies. Hey, sorry, looks like I lost people.
It was really hard to see your screen. It was really blurry all of a sudden.
Yeah, it got real blurry.
Okay.
Yeah.
Jeez. Center Logic wants to restart my computer right now. Okay, let's see.
Now, so it would only make sense.
I love our current IT company. Okay, let me close a couple things here. Hopefully that will help.
Talking, making some noise.
Sorry, I'm just trying to make sure I have everything closed that I can, and making sure my internet connection is good. I was trying to stay connected to the VPN to the city. That does not appear to be working, so. More IT issues to deal with. Okay, I'm gonna try sharing my screen again with you guys.
If we There we go.
Oh, that's a lot better. Or it was. Give me a minute. Oh, she's your friend.
I'm getting connected to a different Wi-Fi now. right this way here. Sorry, bear with me for just 1 second here. Okay, can you guys see the PowerPoint presentation?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. I like Zoom a lot better when I have 2 screens. Okay. So the purpose and role of a budget committee is mainly to answer the question that does the proposed budget meet and satisfy the goals that the city council has set? So throughout the year, the city council will set objectives, goals, vision, and mission through the overarching aspects of their jobs as a governing board and a governing policy to direct staff, John, and staff members to proceed with projects. And we build our budget for the upcoming year based on those policies, directives, mission, and vision. And it is your job as a budget committee to make sure that our budget is meeting those goals. See, welcome, Keith. So this is a very basic general overview of the process of the budget committee. So it initially starts with staff, which includes everybody from on to department managers that will create their budget based on their goals and objectives for the next year. And so we will create a budget, and then next week I will actually give you a version of that proposed budget to review. Hopefully it gives you enough time through next week and before the 16th meeting to take a glance through it, write down any questions that you may have or anything that you see that didn't make sense to you, or questions of numbers that didn't make sense to you or you don't know why this is there. Make sure you write down all those notes. If I can make one recommendation to you as you're reading through the budget and looking through it, just to make sure you recall any questions that you come up. And you're always open to send me those questions beforehand so I can make sure to have some prepared information for you on the spot when we talk about it at the budget committee meeting on the 16th. So on the 16th will be the first of 3 meetings, where the first meeting is going through and adopting the minutes of the previous year, is also going through and recommending or I guess approving a new budget chairperson that will lead the meetings. Last year that was Rachel Berry, who Claire Catt obviously has replaced Rachel. So thank you very much, Claire, for stepping up and being a part of the committee. And we will go through the budget fund by fund. We try as much as we can to stay out of the deep weeds. Like I said, the role of the budget committee is to really look at the larger picture and ensure that what we're doing as a city is helping achieve the goals that are set by the city council. So we'll have 3 meetings. The third meeting is where you will approve the property tax rate that is set, as well as approving the actual proposed budget. And then that budget document goes to the city council. That will happen in June, where we will hold another public hearing for the public to make any kind of comment on the next year's city's budget. And then the city council will approve the property tax rates and the expenditure authority for the city staff and the budget to move forward. Does anybody have any questions about the process or the role?
Yeah, Matt, I had 2 quick questions. I wrote in the chat because I have kids that might scream in the background, but I think my 2 questions are, will you provide a paper copy to me of the proposed budget next week?
Yes. So I am just finishing up the budget message. Most of the document is already done after last night's meeting with the council to kind of confirm just a few kind of directional choices that we've made. And then I'm hoping to get that printed and ready for hard copies to be available by next Wednesday. And then I shot in an email to you earlier today, a question of how you wanted to receive that budget, because we there's an appointment for you to pick it up at City Hall, or I'm very happy to drive around and drop them off on the doorstep and kind of ring the doorbell and run away. So that will be an option as well. And it will also be available on the internet for people to download and read through themselves as well.
And then my second question was around, are the budget committee meetings public? And we're in a weird time, so people probably won't participate, but are they still public? Yes.
Yes, they are always public. And the 3 meetings, now that we're not live streaming this meeting right now, but I have figured out how to do it easily. So we will live stream the meeting through YouTube and possibly Facebook as well. And so the public will have an option to comment on the 3 meetings that we hold for the public. For those budget committee meetings, there are opportunities for public comment at the beginning of every single one of those meetings.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay.
Where's our committee at?
This is kind of a makeshift committee, Keith.
Sure.
We don't have an official quorum, so this isn't an official budget committee meeting. It's just an informational one. So being that Claire is a new member to the committee, she thought, and the rest of the people in attendance thought it would be still useful to go through the presentation at least and answer any questions that we can.
I'm sure she'll do fine.
All right, so the fund structure overview, and this is really a kind of to give you a basic overview of how the layout of all funding works for the city of St. Helens. The best way I try to explain it to people is to think of the city with a bunch of different buckets, and each bucket has a different purpose. Each bucket gets its revenue from a certain source. And there are restrictions and guidelines and laws that determine how we can spend that money. And the budget is really a document of what we call expenditure authority to give us as staff members in the city council the approval to be able to spend that money that is allocated. So there are 5 main categories when you think of the fund structures of the city of St. Helens. The general fund is the biggest one. It's usually the one that we talk about the most because it encompasses a lot of different departments. So this would be your general administration, city recorder, city council, municipal court, police, library, parks, police, all the general stuff.
Hey, Matt, thanks for putting 2 police buckets on there. I appreciate it.
Did I put 2 police buckets on there?
Yeah,
Oh, look at that.
I'm sure Brian will love it.
I'm sure Brian will. It depends on which bucket he's in, I guess.
Yeah.
So the general fund is where all of our property tax revenue goes. That is the main revenue source of the general fund, along with internal fund service charges. So we have our utility billing office that is under finance, and that is where the second police one should say finance. And in the finance department, we have our utility billing office. So the utility billing office, those salaries and expenses in that department are actually charged to the enterprise funds for water, sewer, and storm because they're doing the water, sewer, and storm service as far as billing, working with customers, and that side of things. So we actually get to charge those expenses to the enterprise funds, and that is seen as revenue for the general fund. The second category is special revenue funds. So those involve three main funds that we are proposing in this year's budget: community development, community enhancement, and streets. I will note to the staff and members that are here that the visitor tourism fund used to be its own fund in the special revenue fund sections. We are proposing this next year to put it into community development. It's a little bit easier. It will still be a specific department with its specific revenues to spend. But as most of you probably know, the last couple of years we've had to do a transfer from the general fund to ease some of the spending in tourism. And that's really a timing issue with how events happen and where our fiscal and budget year line up. So our budget year for the states, for organizations in the state of Oregon is July 1st through June 30th. And obviously we have a lot of events that happen in the summertime with 13 nights, July 4th, and then we have Halloween Town right around the corner. And so a lot of those expenses happen all throughout the year. And so we don't really have a specific calendar, so to speak, that it's easy to track and keep track of revenue coming in and expenses coming in. It always evens out. When we've done transfers in the past 2 years, what we have done is take a transfer on June 30th, and then on July 1st, then we do a transfer back. So it's really like a one-day funding loan thing that we just have to do for budgetary reasons in the state of Oregon. So with moving it to the Community Development Fund, we don't anticipate having to do those fund transfers in there because there are enough funds in the community development to float it through those budget year cycles. So community development has a few separate departments in it in addition to the Visitor Tourism Fund. That is where we have the Economic Planning Department that is operated by John, as well as a couple departments set up specifically for the waterfront property, as well, what we're calling, the riverfront property, which is the property right obviously on the river, also formerly known as the Veneer property. The other departments that are in that community development fund are a central waterfront department that is mainly the lagoon and some of the study work that we are still in the process of doing to figure out the future of that treatment plant. There also is a department called the Industrial Business Park, and that is the old white paper plant that was purchased by the city that the city is starting to plan a business industrial park there. So that is where we track all of those expenses. And it's specifically set up as a special revenue funds because we receive a lot of very specialized grants to do some of those study projects. And so we have to record those funds appropriately in a special revenue fund. The Community Enhancement Fund is something that has been in existence for a long time. It's not as readily used as it was many years ago, but it entails some grants and revenue that is specific to Margaret and the library, some STEM grants that they received, as well as some specific revenue like room rental fees that Margaret and the library use for specific expenses having to do with facility maintenance and other things like that. The Community Enhancement Fund was also part of where the city recorded grant funds for a police service for mental health. And that was a grant received by the city of St. Helens that was recorded and expended in that Community Enhancement Fund. That grant is now closed out for the police. And so really the only thing in there is a small amount for the library, as well as the Arts and Cultural Commission has a separate program department set up within that fund to help track all of the revenue and expenditures that that commission deals with. The Streets Department Streets Fund is pretty self-explanatory. It has to deal with all of our street maintenance as well as street lights And its main revenue source from that is the motor vehicle tax, as well as state grants that Sue receives for doing some of our street maintenance work. And Sue, feel free to jump in if there's something that I miss or don't explain fully or that you want to say. So don't hesitate to chime in. The third category that is in the fund structure are system development charge funds. So every time a developer comes in and builds a house or an apartment or a certain amount of improvements on their own property, the city charges what's known as SDC charges. There's our system development charges. And those are based on a fee structure that is set up and approved by the city council that has to deal with how big of an impact the development has on the surrounding properties and communities and the system that the city operates. So water SDCs would be specific to the water system. So if an apartment complex is built, we have to calculate what the impact is on the current system, and they help pay for improvements and build outs of that water system to help keep the capacity at a certain level. So same thing for sewer, storm, streets, as well as parks. The fourth category is probably the second main category in the city, and those are our enterprise funds. So those are set up specifically for water, sewer, and storm, each have their own fund. Enterprise funds within the state of Oregon were created specifically to ensure that charges for those funds stayed within the funds. I guess what I mean is they're meant to be self-sustaining. So the water department should be operating within a budget that is self-sustaining within them. So they shouldn't be receiving money from something else, and money shouldn't be charged to that fund that is for the police department or along those kind of similar lines. So same thing for sewer as well as storm. You'll see in the budget document, especially in the budget message, that I do include some forecasts for the water, sewer, and storm funds. The water and sewer funds are fairly healthy for what we're looking at. The storm fund has been a little bit of a forecasting issue in the future, mainly because of its operating revenue and operating expenses not really aligning in the future. So we are, and Sue is taking the lead on a master plan in the next year or two to finish for the sewer and the storm fund for those programs to ensure that it stays functional and sustainable. Any questions so far that I'm missing?
I have one, Matt, and that's around, and I guess it applies more to the slide we saw previously around the process.
Yeah.
I thought of it with parks, because I know that parks and trails have its own committee. Has that committee reviewed any of the recommended budget from the staff before it comes to us? So it's a process question.
No, so usually the commission members do not receive a copy of the proposed budget as far as getting their approval. That's the role of basically of just the budget committee as a whole. So they have access to the document, they can inspect it and read through it and ask questions just like anybody else from the public. But the city and city council do not need their specific approval to move forward with approving a budget. But
have they seen it before? I mean, I'm not talking about approval. Have they seen it and made recommendations or suggestions? Using parks as a specific example, have they seen it before it hits your desk and it's going to hit my front porch next Wednesday?
Correct. On that note, I would say in the past that no, the city and I specifically have not directly contacted commission members to let them know that the budget is out. But that is a good thing to think about, and I will definitely make those changes. I think that is a good recommendation if I can take that from you, to make sure that we include the commission members in the rollout of the proposed budget, and they can have a chance to review it and ask questions, just like anybody of the public.
Okay, thank you.
I was just going to say that they do review all of the whatever plans we have for the park and whatnot. So they've already reviewed everything, any of the goals that are coming up or projects that are coming up. So they have reviewed that. So yes.
Yeah. So to go along with what Councilor Locke was saying, we try to, throughout the year in the Parks Commission, go through various projects, and they try to prioritize what they want to see done. And then we look to see what we can incorporate into the budget. And then that's what gets put in for our capital improvement project type of things. The rest of the budget, the most of the parks budget is just basic maintenance, and that doesn't change a whole lot.
Okay, so
it's-
for the commissions that are active, do they have plans or goals that are published to the public? Or are those just recommendations? I think that's what I'm sticking on, is like, do those groups, if you call them committees or commissions, have plans that are published to the public that we can kind of cross-reference to or align with the budget?
Everybody's waiting to answer. So in line with what Keith and Sue says, in a way, in an indirect way, yes. And that's through the master plan process that we do for water, sewer, streets, as well as parks. Now, obviously the parks master plan has a lot of stuff on it and a lot of money that we don't have. So that's where the commission comes in to help the city council recommend priorities for those projects to see what moves forward. And then hopefully as grants become available or funding of some sort comes available, we can start to move forward on those projects. So they do review the master plans for their commissions, but that's really specific to the Parks Commission as well. And I'm sure I know I see Councilor Martin has joined the conversation. And I'm not sure if he wants to provide any insight on how the Parks Commission works with the budget process and the projects that may or may not get included.
So I was just going to continue because since Doug he doesn't know what happened in the past. But anyway, so the commission, they come up with their recommendations and whatnot, and then they prioritize them. But all of those minutes and agendas and meetings are public record. So anybody can go and look at all the agendas and minutes and everything and read what's been talked about as the year goes on. But we probably could do a better job of marketing that, yes. So go ahead, Doug, if you got anything to add.
Well, apparently you're talking about how projects and how the commission weighs in. We're doing that pretty much. We were just right in the middle of doing that when the virus hits. So our next meeting was to prioritize the projects that we wanted completed, and then actually get them to me, and I would run them by the council in terms of priority, and then we would recommend staff to look at those and pass them on to the budget committee. And that would be through Sue Nelson, who's the head of Public Works and PARS. Did I answer that okay?
Did we do a good job at answering that for you? To give you
Yeah, Matt, thank you. So can you run through just really quickly a list of all of the committees or commissions that exist in the city of St. Helens? So I know that there's the Parks Commission, there's a Friends of the Library, but does that act as an advising board or not?
It is. I'm going to unmute Margaret because maybe she might be able to chime in and give some better insight on the direction of the library board. Margaret, are you there?
Yes. Claire, there are two organizations. You said the Friends of the Library. That's actually a nonprofit organization that conducts the book sales and raises
Okay,
funds
so
for
it's
extras
the
at the library.
commission
There's a library board,
board.
and they were very active in helping us create a strategic plan 3 years ago.
Okay.
And we have different working groups that came out of those plans. And so we have one that addresses communications, one addresses access, and one addresses the facilities. So within those working groups, there are active projects that have staff and library board members on each of those working groups. But as far as tying those activities to the budget, there are certainly things in the strategic plan that we have elected to do, and they are part of our budget. But the process with the library board at this point in time does not involve having them do any specific budgeting activities for the work that they're doing. That happens independently with, my budget planning process with Matt and the proposed budget that I give to him.
Thanks.
I'm sorry. Does that answer your question?
But somebody needs to tell all the different committees, though.
Well, I just want to back up on parks as well. And I might add that we stay within the master plan parameters, but there's these little flexible kinds of situations that come up, like urban trails and other kinds of things that are not in the master plan that we would want to see put into the master plan. So a lot of, before we act on the budget, it needs to be in the master plan. However, each park has a representative on the Parks Commission, and they report in the Parks Commission to the improvements for each park. So that's kind of the way it works. And as we see the monetary funds coming before us, what we will review in the budget committee is if we prioritize parks or library or police or whatever. So I don't know if I answered your question or not, Claire.
No, yes, you absolutely did, Doug. Thank you. So I would like a list of the boards or commissions or committees that exist. So we have the library board, the Parks Commission. What else exists, John?
John, can you help out on that?
Sure. Yeah. I couldn't quite hear what she was saying. The Arts Commission, the Planning Commission. There was tourism's now the City Council.
The boards and commissions that we have.
Council.
Yeah, there's the Youth Council that we don't want to forget.
And actually the parks is now 2 commissions. It's the trails and parks both together combined.
Yeah, Historic Landmarks Commission, which was combined with the Planning Commission a few years ago. We used to have like 8 or 9 commissions, but we did some consolidation just to be more efficient a few years ago.
And there is also the Arts and Cultural Commission.
Right.
So what I would assume from all of these commissions is that they have plans put in place, and then the department heads make budgets based on those plans, but the commission doesn't necessarily see the budget that's proposed to the City Council. Am I interpreting that correctly?
Essentially, yes.
Yeah, I mean, there are generally, with the exception of the Planning Commission and a limited capacity for quasi-judicial decisions, they're all advisory commissions to the council. And a lot of the things that they're advising the council on is, priorities and not so much the resources, right? So,
Sorry, I love watching your kid in the back, Claire.
I know you need to move over just a little bit so we can.
We're not laughing at you. It's at the scene behind.
That's what
Okay,
energy looks
I think
like.
I got it. So, I mean, those advising bodies have made priorities that they deem valuable to the city, and then essentially the department head translates those and works them in the budget as they are able to. Is that accurate?
It goes to the city council first, Claire. So the city council either approves the recommendations or changes them a little bit, depending on what it is.
Did you hear me?
I think your video and audio is kind of stretching out.
But the slide that I just saw around the process showed budget from Matt. Okay, the slide previously that I saw from Matt, I saw that the department heads or departments would submit a budget request and then thank you. And then the budget committee meet. All I'm saying is that between staff and budget committee, if anyone has reviewed the proposed budgets, or instead it's up to the eyes of the authorities or what they've been hearing from their committees to make those budget proposals.
Correct. So
that's what I'm asking.
yes. So for your direction of process, it would be up to the department manager to submit those budget requests in their budget for next year.
Thank you. That's what I was asking.
Yeah. Sorry for the long-winded answer between everyone.
My comment is that we have plenty of checks and balances, don't we? I mean, it goes a lot of times when there's a priority towards a project, especially in parks, it bounces around a bit and we talk about it, and it finally ends up into the lap of the budget committee.
Yep, and Claire, I do thank you for your comments, though. I think you did bring up a good point, at least that I took, in that I think we can market the proposed budget a little bit more in letting know commission members specifically to be included on the email that the proposed budget is ready to be reviewed and receive comment. So I will definitely do that this year to make it apparent and send them at least an electronic version, and they will also have an opportunity to pick up a paper version through City Hall if they need to.
You're not going to deliver?
I could. I mean, how many commission members are we talking? I'm happy to do that for city council and budget committee members. We're talking maybe 10 trips somewhere. Okay, so going back to just finishing up this slide right here, I can talk briefly about the internal service funds. We have 4 main internal service funds. Major equipment, which is where mainly that is for our utility funds, the water, sewer, and storm, to place money for vehicle replacements. So instead of spending $500,000 in 1 year to replace a huge piece of equipment, we will save up over 5, 10, 15, 20 years, little chunks of money where we can, to ensure that we have the cash available for replacing major equipment when it comes due to be replaced. The IT services funds is another internal fund that was started a few years ago, and that mainly helps pay for the IT infrastructure and the network of the city. And you'll see in this year's budget that the IT service charges that are placed on each department are a lot higher than what it has been in the previous years. And that mainly stems from a major upgrade for the network and a lot of our computers and replacements that have been neglected over the past several years. So the city has started moving forward with replacing that and has a plan in place for some network upgrades that are much needed. So that obviously comes at a cost. And that cost will be seen for likely this year and next year's budget. And then I would anticipate the charges going back down to a more normal level after those projects are completed. The other major fund in the internal service funds is the public works operations. So that is home to the engineering department as well as the public works. It's basically where we pay all of our public works employees from. Instead of paying them 20% from water, 25% from sewer, and 50% from storm, or however the allocation works. What we do is we do that allocation on the back end and do internal service fund charges for those operations, those personnel expenses, and the engineering department gets split out among water, sewer, and storm evenly because of their work that's associated with all of those enterprise funds.
And streets.
Yes, I'm sorry. Streets is also charged that internal service fund
Right.
for employees. Thank you, Sue.
Yeah, just a clarification.
Yep. The last major internal service fund is the major maintenance fund, and that is a fund set up for specific projects that have to do with facilities. So you'll see this year and in this current budget, as well as in next year's budget, is a large amount for park reinvestment. That is part of that $500,000 that the City Council and Budget Committee both said to move forward as far as reinvestment projects that are being done currently in all of our parks. It is also where we have started a police funding project where we are looking at building a new police station down the road soon. And so some of those funding practices the planning stages for that police come out of the major maintenance. And then any other kind of major maintenance that we have to do to City Hall or the utility billing office that is going through some remodeling right now. So that's where we charge specific departments, and then it's held in the internal service funds until we see those expenses start moving. Does anybody have any questions or comments on the fund structure? Okay. I'm gonna go back to sharing my screen then. So I'll talk for a few minutes and then John, maybe I'll hand it off to you in a couple minutes to just kind of talk about where we're at right now and where we're looking at forward. The words that John and I have been using over the past few weeks of putting this budget together is to be cautiously optimistic. We definitely notice a lot of the changes that are happening as we sit here in a Zoom meeting instead of in the council chambers being face-to-face. But we are still remaining fairly optimistic about the next year's budget. We are being cautious in some of our revenue forecasting. So we're making sure that we take into consideration all the revenue sources that the city receives. And I think being very cautious in what revenue we think we were going to receive to make sure that we're not expending more than is appropriate. John, did you want to talk for just a couple of minutes or however long?
Sure. Yeah, I just wanted to, we're framing this budget as one that we're cautiously optimistic. We're in the middle of this, global health pandemic with kind of uncertain outcomes. I think the words we've been hearing recently are unprecedented and uncertain. It really is. And usually those aren't good words that are associated with good things for budgets. A little more conservative. Internally we've basically gone to almost a spending freeze kind of thing. Any major projects, we're saying, wait a minute, we should just really take a look at this as a necessary expenditure at this point. You know, looking at the positions that we have that are open to be filled and saying, okay, let's really, we don't have the foot on the gas right now. It's not on the brakes either. It's just kind of covering the brake, and we want to see what happens over the next few months to, if we are indeed on the leading edge of a recessionary downturn. Cities are fairly resilient when it comes to recession, but we're certainly not recession proof as the 2009, 10, 11 budgets would prove, because we had a pretty major downturn in the economy. The cities, the lag effect of that, we lost 30% of our staff. It was 25%, 30% in general fund, 25% overall, I think was a statistic. And really worked hard in the recovery to bring some of those people back and bring back the desired services. So we're trying to act appropriately and make good decisions to the council or recommendations to the council. And so that's where we're at. So it's a lot to think about. So I don't know if the councilors want to chime in on that or.
Other than the fact that, yeah, we're already down. We kind of, went through the last one with attrition. A lot of people retired during that period. They weren't really laid off. Most of them all retired. And
Right.
we're really not in that situation anymore. And we also don't have the contingency we had back then either. So, yeah. We could.
Yeah.
We need to keep this in mind. Absolutely.
We don't have the contingency because we're using it to balance the budget and then in the down years, down cycle years. Right.
I think a true fact, without a doubt, a true fact is that we're facing a extremely serious economic downturn with all the unemployment. Nationwide, worldwide, it doesn't look bright at all. However, we're going to have to make safeguards on it. So I like what you're saying about cautiously optimistic. I think those are good words. And when it comes to spending, and especially with large funds, I think we've got to be very, very careful.
I think there's something to think about also, just in that if people who've just lost their jobs see their city spending money on these fancy projects that they maybe in their mind went, that's not necessary, I think that's hard for people too. So when people are suffering and worried about work, I don't think they want to see their city starting another project, So, I mean, you don't want to lose a whole year of projects just because of that either. I mean, maybe in a couple months things will look a lot different, but I think definitely being careful would be the way to go.
I hear you, Leah. We don't want to be fancy.
Yeah, and to note too, that's also an education opportunity for our community members to understand that some of the projects that are even currently going on right now have a dedicated funding source or have grant resources that are helping pay for those. And that's an education opportunity for the city to make sure that we're outreaching and letting them know that, yeah, this park improvement that you're going to see at Campbell Park, in the next summer coming up, is funded fully by development fees and grant funds. So it's not any of our operating revenue or anything like that. So when people see new basketball courts or a new walking trail or those kind of things, and many other public works projects that I'm sure Sue could talk about for hours, but a lot of those projects have separated and dedicated funding sources that don't impact the city. But like you said, I appreciate the comment, and I do think that's an opportunity for the city to make sure that we're putting that word out appropriately.
Perception does matter.
I would add to that, not only perception matters, but perhaps if it could be spun that these are dedicated funds and we're still providing employment to whether it's contractors or our own employees. I mean, I think right now is a time to really capitalize on that message, right? That we have dedicated funding coming in specifically for that project, so we're able to keep people employed.
Good point.
Yep. So that is the end of the presentation. It's pretty short and sweet. If there's any other questions or anything, we have some staff and counselors that are available to answer any questions that you guys have. Leah, do you have anything, any questions or anything?
No, not yet. Of course, once I pour over everything, then, you know,
Oh, yeah.
But no, I think I'm keeping up. Thanks.
Okay. Claire?
Yeah, I think so. We'll pour over the stuff that you provide next week. And then our first meeting's on the 16th, which is 2 weeks from today, or Tuesday
Correct.
today. So then what would be expected for those 3 meetings? Kind of what are the action items or the processing that needs to happen and the timeline for those 3 meetings? What happens in those 3 meetings?
Yep. So the initial meeting will involve appointing a new budget chair that is approved every single year. And so that is appointed by the budget committee and voted on by the budget committee. And then after that is done, we will approve the minutes from the last year. So you will receive a paper copy and an electronic version of the minutes from the previous meetings. And usually the way I've done it in the past is I will compile all of the meeting minutes together from last year, and you will approve them all at once. And so at the second or third meeting, you won't be approving minutes from the previous meeting. I just wait till the next year to do everything all at once. During the first meeting, we will, once we appoint a budget officer, we will start going through the budget by those categories that I showed you. I usually try and start off with some of the easier ones like system development charges and maybe special revenue. And then we'll jump into the general fund and enterprise. And so a little bit of the harder ones, or the more ones that need a little bit more explaining and going through departments and everything. When we do the budget committee meetings, it's usually customary for all of the department heads to be at the meeting. So like Sue and Margaret are here. So you'll have other department managers from police and everywhere else to answer any specific questions. I was elected the budget officer. However, I don't know the ins and outs of every little single thing in the city. And that's where our department managers come into play and can answer some of those nitty gritty specific questions. Because I have no knowledge about streets and water and sewer and pipe and all that kind of stuff. So we rely on Sue to do that. And the same as the library, I don't know everything, all the ins and outs of the library, so it would be inappropriate for me to talk about the library department and any questions that you may have. So we try and have those resources available to you and to answer any questions that you may have. So at the third and final meeting, we will approve a property tax rate, and that property tax rate is set by the county. We can't increase the property tax rate. However, if the city or budget committee ever wanted to, they could elect to approve a lower tax rate. Hopefully, I've never heard of that happening, but it is technically possible. So you would approve the property tax rate and then approve the proposed budget. And then once that is done, that is pretty much the duty of the budget committee, is to approve the budget to send to city council for their review and approval. That would happen in June. So like I said, there are public comments available that will be open at all 3 public meetings. And then during the last meeting, like I said, we'll approve the budget and the property tax rate, and that's about it.
Thank you. That answers my question.
Anybody have anything else to share or say? Hearing no takers, we will go ahead and end this meeting. And I will stop recording and say goodbye to you.
Thank you, Matt.
I appreciate you joining us tonight and dealing with at least the minor technical issues we had.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
All right, all. Have a good one.
You too.
Stay safe.